Okay, welcome. The first thing that we are going to do today is practice riveting. Remember that riveting is a cold connection. It's a way to join two or more pieces of metal together without using heat. You could think about the Eiffel Tower. You could think about the Statue of Liberty, bridges in Washington. There are so many things and so many industries that rivets are used in, but they of course are used in the jewelry industry. And so here's a little rivet here, and here's a hole where I haven't finished a rivet, but let's go ahead and get set up. So in your toolkit, you should have two pieces, very thin pieces of metal taped together that are about 1 inch by 1 inch. You're going to want to go ahead and get those out and take the tape off. Some of the things you're going to need, in addition to your two pieces of thin metal, which I'm going to just set aside for a second, a hammer, either your household or chasing hammer, whatever hammer is in your toolkit. You'll want you're going to want to have your chain nose pliers. You're going to need a Sharpie, your file, and your wire cutters. Okay, so those are some of the things that you're going to need, and we're going to just go ahead and get started with this practice rivet. So this tool here is a hole punch. It is a special hole punch for metal. It is not for paper, so don't use it on anything other than this very, very thin metal, or it can damage it. The first thing that I'm going to do is just decide randomly where I'm going to make two rivets. So I'm going to punch two holes, because I want you to practice two rivets in the top of this piece of metal, okay? And they can be anywhere. Now, the next thing that I'm going to want to do is line these two pieces up together, and the steel block is a good place to do that. I'm going to line them up as carefully as possible, and with my fine point Sharpie, I'm going to make a mark, okay? And that's where I am going to punch only one more hole. Now, when we do this in the classroom, we do not usually use this tool. We often would be doing this with a flexible shaft and a drill bit for accuracy, but this is how we're going to do it at home, okay? So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a punch mark only through one hole of the second piece. So please do not punch both holes out. So you should have a total of 1, 2, 3 holes and one piece that has been marked, and you will see why that is in just a little bit. So now I've got those two pieces. Remember, what I'm going to be doing is joining it with a rivet. Now I've got to find my rivet material. So you have a Ziploc baggie in your toolkit, and this is your final. So the final piece that you're going to be riveting, which I will show you later, you should have a dog tag, and then you have some kind of an element. You might have a wing, you might have a hand, you might have something different, but you should have two pieces of something that kind of look like this. All right, what I want you to do is and a piece of wire in there, I want you to take out the piece of wire. I want you to put these two pieces that are going to be your dog tag pendant, and I want you to put those back in the Ziploc baggie and just set those aside, okay? So this piece of wire is the only piece of 16 gauge wire that I believe you have in your toolkit. I'm just straightening it out. This is what we are going to make the rivet out of. So the first thing that I want to do with that is I want to file it. And this has been cut rough with wire cutters, and I need to go ahead and file it flat. So I'm using the flat end. I have a half round, you have a flat file, so it should be easy. I'm going to file on the push away from myself so that when I look down, I see a circle when I look at it from the top and not a jagged edge, and things look cylindrical. Next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up. I'm going to line up the two holes that I have punched out, and I'm going to put my wire through that. Now this is where it's going to get a little tricky, okay? So it's a little bit loose. When we do this at school, when we can use a drill bit, we can make that hole opening more accurate so that the wire isn't as wiggly. So it's a little wiggly. It's not the most perfect, but it's pretty darn close. What I'm trying to do is leave about 1 millimeter on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to have to kind of eyeball it. It would be fair to say that it's about the thickness of one of these pieces of sheet metal is about 1 millimeter. So one thing I can do is I can take my Sharpie, I can kind of lay this down if it's sticking out, and I can take my fine Sharpie and I can mark where I want that to go. Now if I end up with a piece that's too short, I won't have enough to hammer, and it won't hold my pieces together. If I end up with a piece that is too long, then it's going to bend over and it won't look like a nice rivet. So before I cut, I'm going to kind of eyeball it again. Again, I have on my safety glasses just so this pin doesn't come flying towards me. And I'm going to go ahead and make a cut with my wire cutters, let that wire drop. I'm going to keep the pin, if I can, in between those two plates of metal. I'm going to grab my file, and I'm going to either do this on the steel block if that is working for you to file that end straight. If it doesn't, like say it comes out, then I could pick it up. I could also pick it up with my chain nose pliers and hold it pretty firmly, and I could file it this way if it doesn't want to sit inside that little hole. Okay. Once I have that, I'm gonna line the holes back up again. I'm gonna brush off the dust. I'm gonna use my chain nose pliers to help me put the rivet, the little tiny wire, through the holes, okay, and lay it on the steel block. So now I have this rivet. It's sticking out on my steel block, but it's going through both holes, okay, just how I want it. And I'm looking at the length, and it looks pretty good. It looks like about 2 millimeters are sticking out, which is great because I want about 1 millimeter on each side. I'm going to pick up my hammer. I'm going to hold very firmly these pieces of metal together. I'm going to kind of make them, twist them so they're the way I want them, and I'm going to start to hammer straight down. I hit like 3 times. I'm going to use my finger to flip over the piece of steel, keeping it on the block. Again, now I'm going to hit on this side. 1, 2, 3. I'm just trying to spread the copper evenly. So each time I flip it over, I'm pushing down with the metal. 2, 3. And then I'm going to push down again. I want to have something to hit. I'm making sure that the copper is starting to stick out. Okay, and I'm working it back and forth. So this is called a pin rivet or a standard rivet. And I like to sort of imagine that I'm hammering around the top of a mushroom cloud. Once I feel like the pieces are stuck together and they're not going to come apart, like maybe I can still twist them, I'm going to kind of just gently kind of tap around the top to sort of dome them down. And when I think that I've gotten it where I want it, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop. I don't want to over hammer it. If I over hammer it and make it too thin, it can pop. If I don't hammer it enough and spread it enough, it can also come out. So it's a fine balance, but this is what it should look like. So now I'm just going to practice one more, and maybe this time I'll make it accidentally a little bit too long so I can show you what to do if that happens to you. So I want to go back to where I drilled that first hole, where I drilled that hole here, and now I'm going to put my second hole in, and I can see the mark that I made. I don't know if you can see it, but it shifted, and that's because when I cinched those two pieces together with that rivet, it moved it. So now I want to go back, and I just want to put my rivet tool right straight through that hole as if I were drilling through it and punch through it. Okay, and then I'm going to very carefully kind of twist it off. I'm trying not to bend the metal as I'm doing this. Now when I go to hammer the next rivet, I'm going to have to hang it off the edge of my steel block. Otherwise the height of this rivet's going to interfere with that, so I want to make sure I hammer it that way. I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to take that 16 gauge wire, file it nice and flat so that I have a cylinder. I'm going to line it up. This time I'm going to make it, I'm going to actually purposely cut it a little bit too long so you can see how you could fix it if that happens to you, because this is a real common mistake, and sometimes we can just sort of fix that in the process. This time I'm cutting this one. You can see that's too long, right? It's hanging out too much. It's like hanging out on the right amount on this side where my thumb is. It's too long on the other side. So what could you do? Well, if you notice it right away, then you could, put it down here and you could cut a little bit more of it off. So I'm going to cut a little bit more off, but then every time I cut more off, remember what I have to do. I have to file it. So now I'm going to put it back in my pliers. It's a little bit like surgery here, and I'm going to file it flat. Oops, it wants to move on me when I do it, so I got to hold it pretty carefully. Sometimes you drop it like I just did. So again, we file. It's so much easier to file one end when your piece is large. It's much harder to file that second end once it's been cut. It makes a big difference. If you try to hammer when it's jagged, the hammer will not strike down straight and it won't bend your rivet. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. This might still be a little bit too long, and I'll know once I start to hammer it. Okay, so this is definitely sticking out more than my first one. Remember, I'm going to hang it over the edge so that I don't interfere with that side. And now I'm going to start to hammer. So can you see as I try to hammer that side just a few taps and spread it, it wants to bend. So I can already tell that this one, I've started to bend it. It's too long. So again, I can go back, I can go in with my wire cutters rather, and cinch a little bit off. Please make sure you're wearing your safety glasses, because if you try to take that little particle off, it's going to want to shoot out. Now I'm going to file it flat while it's in there, and now, even though it's bent a little bit, it's closer to being the right size. So now I'm going to lay it down. I'm going to start over, tap, tap. I'm going to flip it. I'm going to push it down. I'm hanging it over the edge. Tap, tap, tap. Pushing it down. I'm going to tap, tap, tap. Push it up. Tap. So I can tell that this one, because it got bent from the beginning, it's not going to be as good of it as the first one. Okay, because what happened was I bent it a little bit when it was too big. And so I just want you to see what it looks like when that happens, when it's too long. So this one started out too long, then it bent a little bit. So while it looks really pretty good on this side here, on this side to me I can see like it's a little bit bigger, but it's okay. So I'm still going to do the same thing where I tap, tap, tap to do it down. But now I have my two rivets, okay? So after practicing, now I'm going to be more confident as I start to go on to working with my final piece. So that is how you do a practice rivet with 16 gauge copper wire and your 1.5 millimeter hole punch tool.